Albert Einstein. The name alone has become a symbol of genius, a mind that reshaped our understanding of the universe. But behind the legend, behind the wild hair and sharp eyes that we see in old photographs, there was once just a little boy who struggled with words, who was often misunderstood, and who was considered ordinary, maybe even slow, by the world around him. This is not just the story of a scientist, but of a human being who turned doubt into discovery, silence into breakthroughs, and questions into answers that changed the way humanity sees reality itself. Today, we will take a long journey through Einstein's life in 7 chapters, walking step by step from his quiet beginnings to his rise as one of the greatest minds in history. And as you listen, remember this: genius is not born overnight. It is built through struggle, curiosity, and courage to see the world differently. Chapter 1: The Quiet Boy Who Spoke Late. Albert Einstein entered the world on March 14, 1879, in the small German city of Ulm. At first glance, nothing about him seemed extraordinary. His family was not wealthy, nor was it famous. His father, Hermann Einstein, ran a small business selling electrical equipment, while his mother, Pauline, cared for the home and had a deep love for music. They were ordinary parents raising an ordinary child, or at least that's what everyone thought. But life had a strange way of proving otherwise. From the very beginning, Albert seemed different. He didn't fit the usual picture of a lively, talkative child. In fact, he barely spoke at all. Unlike other children who started forming words at 1 or 2 years old, Einstein took much longer. His parents grew worried, and whispers spread among relatives that something might be wrong with the boy. They feared he might never speak properly. Imagine that for a moment, the child who would later shake the entire foundation of science was once seen as a boy who could barely string sentences together. But his silence was not emptiness. Inside his quiet mind, something profound was happening. While the world thought he was slow, he was busy watching, observing, and noticing details that others overlooked. He noticed how objects moved, how shadows stretched, how sounds echoed. He was storing questions deep inside himself, questions too big for a little boy to express. One story from his early childhood captures this perfectly. When Albert was about 5 years old, he fell sick, and his father gave him a small compass to play with while he recovered in bed. For most children, a compass is just a toy with a needle that moves. But for young Einstein, it was magic. He stared at the needle, shocked that it always pointed in the same direction, no matter how he turned it. He couldn't see what was pulling it. There were no strings, no hands, no visible force. It was invisible, and yet it was real. This moment became one of his earliest memories of wonder. That little compass planted the seed of curiosity that would one day grow into theories that reshaped our understanding of space and time. Yet, despite this deep curiosity, school life was hard for him. Teachers misunderstood him. They saw him as a dreamer, too slow to keep up with the rest of the class. He struggled to memorize facts and repeat them on command. In a system that valued obedience and rote learning, Einstein's quiet, questioning nature was considered a weakness. One teacher even told him, "You will never amount to anything." Imagine how painful those words must have been, not only for a child, but for his parents as well. But here's the truth. Those very weaknesses, his refusal to simply memorize, his tendency to question instead of obey, his silence that hid a storm of ideas, were the beginnings of his genius. Einstein's childhood reminds us of something powerful. Genius doesn't always look like genius in the beginning. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like slowness. Sometimes it looks like failure. But hidden within those struggles are the first sparks of greatness. The late-speaking boy from Ulm, misunderstood and underestimated, was not broken. He was simply building a mind that worked differently. And that difference would one day allow him to see the universe in ways no one else could. So, when you think about Einstein as a child, don't imagine the confident scientist with the messy hair and wise eyes. Imagine a little boy sitting quietly, staring at a compass, lost in thought. Imagine the worry of his parents, the criticism of his teachers, and the loneliness he must have felt. And then realize that sometimes the very things that make us different are the things that prepare us for greatness. Einstein's story begins not with brilliance, but with doubt. Not with applause, but with misunderstanding. Yet from that very ordinary beginning, the extraordinary was born. Chapter 2: The Curious Rebel. As Einstein grew older, the silence of his early years began to fade, but the questions inside him only grew louder. By the time he entered primary school in Munich, Germany, his family hoped he would finally fit in. They wanted him to be a normal student, to follow instructions, and to earn the praise of his teachers. But Albert was not like the other children. Where they were quick to accept what they were told, he was quick to ask, why? And this simple word, why, made all the difference. School in those days was not a place for curiosity. It was strict, rigid, and almost military in style. Students were expected to sit quietly, memorize facts, and repeat them without error. Creativity was discouraged. Questioning authority was seen as disrespectful. But Albert could not silence his mind. When his teacher explained something, Albert wanted to know more than just the answer. He wanted to know the reason behind it, the hidden truth. He would sit there, his mind wandering beyond the lesson, imagining light beams traveling through space or invisible forces shaping the world. Teachers often mistook this daydreaming for laziness. One teacher, frustrated with his constant questions, famously told him, "Einstein, you will never get anywhere in life if you continue to sit there dreaming all the time." Another even said that he might as well leave school, as his presence was a disruption. Imagine that. One of the greatest minds in history was once dismissed as a failure in the classroom. But here's the powerful truth. The very thing his teachers saw as a weakness, his refusal to blindly accept information, was the seed of his genius. At home, however, Albert's parents saw glimpses of his unique mind. His mother, Pauline, nurtured his love for music. She encouraged him to learn the violin, and though he resisted at first, music would later become one of the great loves of his life. It wasn't just entertainment for him, it was a way of thinking. Music, like science, had patterns, rhythms, and hidden structures. When Einstein played the violin, he wasn't only producing notes, he was training his brain to see connections, to think beyond the obvious, and to feel the harmony of the universe. His father, Hermann, also fueled his curiosity in a different way. He gave Albert books about mathematics and science, subjects that fascinated him far more than the memorization drills of school. Albert devoured these books in his free time, teaching himself advanced concepts long before they were introduced in class. This self-study became a habit that defined him for life. He wasn't content with what school gave him. He wanted to chase knowledge on his own terms. There's another story from his teenage years that shows this spirit. One day, he discovered a geometry book, a simple school textbook, and described it later as his holy little geometry book. He was amazed at how logical it all seemed, how every problem could be solved, step by step. He would spend hours solving problems, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. For Einstein, mathematics was not a subject. It was a playground for the mind. But life was not easy for the Einstein family. His father's business began to struggle, and eventually the family had to move to Italy in search of better opportunities. Albert was left behind in Munich to finish school, but he was miserable. He hated the rigid system, the endless discipline, the lack of freedom to think. Eventually, he made a bold decision. He walked away. At just 15 years old, Einstein dropped out of school. To many, this was proof that he was a failure. What kind of future could a boy with no diploma and no obedience have? Yet this moment was not the end. It was the beginning. Leaving school did not kill his hunger for knowledge. Instead, it gave him the freedom to learn in his own way. In Italy, he rejoined his family and spent his time reading, studying, and thinking. He discovered philosophers like Kant, who made him question not just science, but the very nature of reality and truth. He wasn't just learning facts anymore. He was shaping a worldview, a way of thinking that would later shake the foundations of science itself. This chapter of Einstein's life is a reminder of something powerful. True learning does not always happen inside the classroom. Sometimes the classroom rejects you. Sometimes the teachers don't understand you. Sometimes the system tries to box you in. But if your hunger for knowledge is strong enough, no rejection can stop you. Einstein's teenage years prove that grades and diplomas do not define intelligence. What matters is curiosity, persistence, and the courage to think differently. When we look at Einstein during this period, we don't see the world-famous genius yet. We see a rebellious teenager, misunderstood by his teachers, uncertain about his future, but burning with questions. He was ordinary in so many ways, awkward, struggling, and unsure. Yet beneath the surface, an unstoppable force was forming. His rebellion was not against learning. It was against a system that tried to limit learning. That is the difference between failure and genius. And so, as Albert walked away from the classrooms of Munich, many thought he had thrown his future away. But little did they know, he was walking towards something far greater. He was walking toward a life where he would not just study the universe, he would redefine it. Chapter 3. A Young Man Against the Odds. When Einstein left the classrooms of Munich behind, he carried with him no diploma, no glowing recommendation, and no teacher to praise his talents. To many, he looked like a failure, just another teenager who could not handle discipline. But what others saw as the end of his story was, in truth, the spark of a new beginning. For Albert, walking away from school was not walking away from learning. It was walking toward freedom, toward the chance to follow curiosity without chains. In Italy, living with his family once again, Albert finally breathed freely. The strict classrooms were gone, the constant shouting of teachers silenced. Now, he could explore knowledge the way he wanted. He walked the streets of Milan, absorbing the world, reading voraciously, and filling his mind with ideas far beyond his age. Books became his greatest companions. He read mathematics, physics, philosophy, and even literature. Every page fed his hunger. Every idea pushed him deeper into the mysteries of life. He once said, "Curiosity has its own reason for existing." And during these years, his curiosity burned brighter than ever. But while his mind was soaring, his family's fortunes were sinking. His father's business had failed, leaving the family struggling. They had dreamed of wealth in Italy, but instead they faced disappointment. For Albert, this meant one thing. The luxury of endless study was not guaranteed. He needed a future, a path, something that could secure both his survival and his passion. This is when Einstein set his sights on Switzerland. There was a school in Zurich, the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School, that had a reputation for progressive teaching. Unlike the rigid German system, it encouraged independent thought, creativity, and talent. It seemed like the perfect place for a boy like Albert. But there was one problem. He was too young and did not have the proper diploma. Still, Einstein was not one to bow to rules. At just 16, he applied. The entrance exam was brutal. While Albert excelled in mathematics and physics, so much so that his answers stunned the examiners, he performed poorly in subjects like languages and history. His application was rejected. To many, this might have been the final blow. Imagine being told you are too weak in school subjects to be admitted to your dream institution, even when you clearly outshine others in the very subjects you love. But Albert did not quit. He enrolled in a smaller school in Aarau, Switzerland, to strengthen his general education. This move was life-changing. Aarau was nothing like Munich. Here, students were encouraged to ask questions, to think for themselves, to explore knowledge beyond the textbook. Finally, Einstein was in an environment that matched his spirit. His teachers respected him, not for obedience, but for his brilliance. He thrived, not because someone told him what to think, but because he was free to think. It was also during these years in Aarau that Einstein began to dream the dreams that would one day reshape science. He often thought about light, asking himself questions no one else dared to ask. What would it be like to chase a beam of light? Could you ever catch it? What would you see if you traveled alongside it? These were not questions for a teenager, but for a revolutionary mind. His thought experiments, as they came to be called, would later become the foundation of his theory of relativity. But they started here, in a small Swiss school, in the mind of a young man still searching for his place in the world. After finishing in Aarau, Einstein finally gained admission to the Polytechnic in Zurich. This was the turning point. He was no longer the dropout, the failure, the boy who was told he would never succeed. He was now officially a student of science, ready to step onto the path that would lead to greatness. But even here, life was not simple. At the Polytechnic, Einstein was not the perfect student. He often skipped classes, frustrated with professors who clung to outdated ideas. Instead, he spent long hours studying alone, diving deep into theories and problems that fascinated him. His notebooks filled with equations, his thoughts racing ahead of his peers. Some teachers resented his independence, while others recognized his brilliance but worried about his lack of discipline. Once again, Einstein stood apart, not fitting into the mold, not walking the expected path. Outside of academics, life was also challenging. He was poor, living frugally, often struggling to afford basic needs. At times he felt like an outsider, drifting between worlds, belonging fully to none. Yet through it all, he held on to one thing: his passion for understanding the universe. That passion was his anchor, his guiding star. During these years, Einstein also began to form the habits that would define him. He walked endlessly, often lost in thought. He played the violin, finding comfort in music when the world seemed heavy. He debated fiercely with friends, challenging ideas, testing his theories. He learned, slowly, the power of persistence, that genius is not a sudden spark, but the steady flame that refuses to die, even when the winds of doubt and failure blow hardest. This chapter of his life is not about discovery or fame. It is about struggle, persistence, and the unshakable belief that following your curiosity is worth every sacrifice. Einstein had no wealth, no powerful connections, no easy path. What he had was hunger, the hunger to know, to understand, to uncover the secrets of the world. And so, as he walked through the halls of Zurich, head filled with questions, notebooks filled with equations, and pockets nearly empty, no one could yet imagine what this young man would become. But Einstein himself, deep down, knew one thing. He was not walking backward into failure. He was marching, step by step, into history. Chapter 4: Rejection, Poverty, and the Silent Years. Graduating from Zurich Polytechnic should have been Albert Einstein's moment of triumph. After years of hard work, after countless battles against rigid teachers and endless hours of self-study, he had finally earned his diploma in physics and mathematics. He was young, ambitious, and ready to contribute to the world. Most of his classmates were immediately offered jobs as assistants, working under professors or in research institutes. But when it came to Einstein, things were different. One by one, doors closed in his face. Professors he had challenged in class refused to recommend him. They remembered the stubborn young man who skipped lectures and dared to argue with them. Now, when he needed their support, they turned away. Letters of recommendation, so essential in the academic world, never came. Without them, Einstein was invisible, just another graduate lost in the crowd. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and Einstein was still unemployed. His savings dwindled. He sent applications everywhere: schools, research labs, even for teaching jobs at small colleges. Silence followed. The world had no place for him. He walked through the streets of Zurich with heavy steps, carrying not just his books, but also the weight of rejection. These were the silent years of Einstein's life. Years when he was not celebrated as a genius, but dismissed as a failure. He gave private tutoring lessons, teaching math and physics to uninterested students just to survive. Sometimes he couldn't even collect payment. Other times he was so poor that he had to rely on friends for meals. There were days when he felt invisible, forgotten, left behind by the very system he had dreamed of joining. But here's the paradox. While the world saw him as useless, Einstein's mind was alive like never before. He carried his notebooks everywhere, filling them with equations and ideas. He spent hours in libraries, devouring scientific journals, analyzing the works of great physicists, and questioning theories that others accepted as truth. He refused to let poverty steal his curiosity. His mind was still chasing beams of light, still searching for answers no one else was asking. It was during this time of despair that a miracle happened. Not the kind of miracle people expect, but one born out of persistence and timing. Through a friend's recommendation, Einstein finally secured a position at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. It was not glamorous. It was not a university post. It was a government job reviewing technical patents, applications for inventions, designs, and machinery. He worked as a low-level clerk, reading through endless descriptions of devices, analyzing whether they were new or practical. To many, this would have been a dead end, a job far below the ambitions of a man who dreamed of unlocking the secrets of the universe. But for Einstein, the patent office became a hidden sanctuary. It gave him something precious: stability. The modest salary allowed him to survive, to marry his college sweetheart, Mileva Maric, and to live in a small apartment. More importantly, the job gave him freedom. The work, while repetitive, was not mentally exhausting. He finished his duties quickly, and then, during quiet afternoons or late into the night, he worked on his own theories. This is the lesson hidden in Einstein's struggle. Sometimes the path to greatness is not straight, and sometimes what looks like failure is actually preparation. The patent office became his private laboratory of the mind. As he reviewed patents for clocks and electromagnetic devices, his thoughts kept circling back to the same questions. What is time? What is light? How do they truly work? The seeds of revolution were quietly growing in the mind of a man the world had already overlooked. Yet these years were not without pain. Einstein often felt isolated. His marriage was strained, money was always tight, and recognition was non-existent. He sent his early papers to leading physicists, but most ignored him. Imagine working day and night, pouring your heart into ideas, only to be dismissed without reply. But still, he wrote, still he calculated, still he believed. And then came 1905, what history would call Einstein's annus mirabilis, the miracle year. While working as an unknown patent clerk, he published 4 groundbreaking papers that would change physics forever. They were about the photoelectric effect, Brownian motion, special relativity, and the relationship between mass and energy. Yes, the famous equation E and mc2. But none of this would have been possible without the struggles of the years before. The rejection, the silence, the patent office. What seemed like obstacles were, in truth, stepping stones. Einstein's story during these silent years teaches us something profound. Genius is not recognized immediately. Success is not instant. And rejection is not the end. In fact, rejection can sometimes be the gift that gives you time to grow in your own way, without interference, without pressure. If Einstein had been given an assistant job under a professor, maybe he would have followed their path, their research, their limitations. But because he was ignored, he was free. Free to think differently, free to revolutionize science. So in Chapter 4, we don't see Einstein as the celebrated scientist. We see him as the struggling young man, walking the streets with unpaid bills, facing rejection letters, working in a small office, and dreaming of light and time. This is the Einstein no one talks about. The Einstein who failed, who suffered, who questioned himself, but who never, ever stopped believing in his mind. And this is where greatness is born. Not in applause, not in recognition, but in silence, in persistence, in the quiet refusal to give up. Chapter 5. The Miracle Year. When the world finally listened, The year was 1905. In the quiet city of Bern, Switzerland, Albert Einstein lived a modest life. By day, he was still a low-level clerk at the Swiss Patent Office, sitting at his desk surrounded by stacks of invention applications. By night, he returned to his small apartment with his wife, Mileva, and their baby. His salary was enough for bread and rent, but nothing more. The world still knew him as nobody, an ordinary man, an outsider, a dreamer with no university title, no recognition, no glory. But inside, Einstein's mind was burning. The years of rejection and silence had not killed his curiosity, they had sharpened it. Every moment of free time, every late-night hour, he spent scribbling notes, running calculations, and questioning everything the world believed about light, motion, and time. The patent office, to him, was not just a workplace. It was a disguise, a secret cover for a mind preparing to explode with discovery. And then it happened. In that single year, 1905, Einstein wrote and published 4 scientific papers that would transform the entire foundation of physics. Think about that for a moment. A man ignored by professors, denied jobs, and dismissed by the academic world suddenly produced enough groundbreaking work in 1 year to secure his place among the greatest minds in history. The first paper was on the photoelectric effect, where Einstein showed how light could act like particles, not just waves. This idea would eventually give birth to quantum theory and win him the Nobel Prize years later. The second paper explained Brownian motion, proving the existence of atoms that scientists had doubted for centuries. The third introduced the theory of special relativity, challenging everything people thought they knew about space and time. And the fourth, his shortest paper, contained a simple but earth-shaking equation, E mc2, energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. That tiny formula revealed that matter and energy are interchangeable, unlocking secrets that would one day power both nuclear energy and devastating weapons. With just one stroke of genius, Einstein connected the physical world in ways no one had ever imagined. What makes this story so extraordinary is not just the science, but the man behind it. Einstein was not sitting in a grand university office. He was not funded by laboratories or praised by powerful professors. He was working in a cramped patent office, his wife washing dishes, his child crying in the next room. He was ordinary in every way, except for his relentless determination to think, to question, to believe in the power of ideas. At first, no one noticed. The papers were published in the Annalen der Physik, a respected scientific journal, but most scientists ignored them. Who would take seriously a clerk from Bern? But then, slowly, a few great minds began to read, to reread, to realize that something revolutionary had arrived. Max Planck, the father of quantum theory, recognized Einstein's genius and began to support him. Word spread. This unknown man from the patent office had rewritten the laws of the universe. For Einstein, it was surreal. For years he had been rejected, invisible, silenced. Now, suddenly, doors that were once closed began to open. Universities wanted him. Professors who had ignored him now quoted him. He was still the same man, but the world had changed its eyes. And yet, dear listener, here lies the hidden lesson. Einstein did not become a genius in 1905. He had been one all along. The only difference was that the world finally paid attention. The miracle year was not about sudden talent. It was about years of persistence finally blooming. Imagine if Einstein had given up in his silent years. Imagine if poverty, rejection, and failure had convinced him that he was worthless. The world would never have known Ashton MC2. This is why Einstein's story is not just about science. It's about life. It's about you and me. How many times have we felt invisible? How many times have doors closed on our faces? How many times have we thought that our dreams are too big, that the world will never listen? But Einstein proves that rejection is not the end. It's just the waiting room before greatness. He reminds us that you don't need approval to start. You don't need recognition to continue. You don't need permission to dream. What you need is persistence, quiet persistence, the kind that keeps going when no one is watching, the kind that works late at night, even when there's no applause, the kind that believes in the light even when the world is dark. Einstein's miracle year is proof that greatness can emerge from the most unlikely places, from a clerk's desk, from a rejected student, from a man others called a failure. And if it can happen for him, it can happen for you. The miracle is not in the year. It is in the persistence, the courage, the refusal to give up. And so, Chapter 5 is not just about physics. It is about hope. It is about transformation. It is about how one ordinary man, armed with nothing but curiosity and determination, rewrote the universe. Chapter 6. The birth of the theory of relativity, changing the universe forever. As Einstein moved deeper into his career, he entered one of the most transformative stages of his life. By this point, he was no longer the struggling young man sending applications to every university and teaching job. He had found work at the Swiss Patent Office, a place where most people would have treated as just a job, just a way to pay bills, just a way to survive. But Einstein was different. Instead of letting the routine destroy his creativity, he turned it into a laboratory of the mind. Day after day, he reviewed patents, studying machines, engines, and inventions from all over the world. It was repetitive work, yes, but it gave him something precious, uninterrupted time to think. And it was during these years, when the world saw him as an ordinary clerk, that Einstein began to see what nobody else could see: the hidden laws of the universe. Einstein had always carried inside him one burning question. What would the universe look like if I could ride on a beam of light? This simple but powerful thought experiment haunted him since he was 16. While others memorized formulas, Einstein dared to imagine reality from the perspective of light itself. That question was the seed, and from that seed would grow a revolution in science. As he sat at his desk in the patent office, instead of being bored, Einstein traveled in his mind. He imagined clocks moving at different speeds. He imagined observers standing on moving trains. He imagined the bending of space and time itself. To most people, these were daydreams. To Einstein, they were glimpses of truth. And then came 1905, a year now known as the Annus Mirabilis, the miracle year. In that single year, Einstein published not one, not two, but 4 groundbreaking papers that would forever change physics. The most famous of these was his special theory of relativity. In simple words, it said something radical. Time and space are not absolute. They are not fixed. They bend, they stretch, they change depending on how fast you are moving. The faster you move, the slower time flows for you compared to someone standing still. Imagine time itself, the one thing we thought was unshakable, could bend. The universe, as humans had believed for centuries, was not what we thought it was. But Einstein didn't stop there. In that same year, he introduced the equation that would become the most famous in the world, E, mc2. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. With this, he showed that matter and energy are interchangeable, two sides of the same coin. Suddenly, humanity realized that inside even the tiniest particle was unimaginable power. This discovery would later lead to nuclear energy, to atomic bombs, and to a new understanding of the universe's creation itself. All of this, remember, came from the mind of a man who was once called a poor student, who couldn't find a teaching job, who was stuck working in a patent office. Einstein's rise was not only about science, it was about courage. Many scientists at the time laughed at his ideas. They said, "Time cannot change, space cannot bend." But Einstein didn't back down. He had no powerful university title, no huge laboratory, no big team of assistants. He only had his mind, his stubborn belief in the truth, and the courage to follow his imagination wherever it led him. And slowly, the world began to realize this wasn't madness. This was genius. The theory of relativity didn't just change physics. It changed philosophy. It changed technology. It changed the way we see our place in the universe. It told us that reality is not what it appears to be, that even time and space, the stage on which all life unfolds, are flexible, mysterious, and alive. Suddenly, humanity stood face to face with the infinite, and it all came from one man, once ordinary, once underestimated, who dared to think differently. Einstein's story in this chapter teaches us a deep truth. Greatness doesn't always come when the world is watching. Sometimes it comes in the quiet hours, in a small office where nobody believes in you, when you are simply left alone with your imagination. Genius is not about having more resources. It is about using what you have with relentless creativity. Einstein didn't have a lab, but he had his mind. He didn't have status, but he had courage. And with that, he lit a fire that would burn forever in human history. Chapter 7. The Legacy of a Genius. Lessons Beyond Science. As Einstein's fame grew, the boy who once struggled in school, the man who once couldn't even get a teaching job, became one of the most recognizable faces in the entire world. His theory of relativity had not only revolutionized physics, but had also opened doors to technologies that would shape the modern age. GPS systems that rely on relativity to function, nuclear energy that came from the equation E, mc2, and even space exploration, which uses Einstein's equations to navigate the stars. Suddenly, the man who was once just a patent clerk had become the voice of science, the face of genius. But Einstein's story didn't end with scientific glory. No, his later life revealed something even more important: wisdom, humility, and a deep concern for humanity. Einstein understood something many geniuses often forget. Knowledge alone is not enough. Knowledge without wisdom, without kindness, can destroy as much as it creates. His very own discoveries, the formula E, Einstein mc2, which revealed the power hidden in matter, were used to build nuclear weapons. When the atomic bomb was dropped in World War II, Einstein was devastated. Although he had not directly worked on the Manhattan Project, his discoveries had made it possible. The world now held in its hands the power to destroy itself. Einstein, a man who had spent his life unlocking the mysteries of the universe, was forced to ask himself, what is the responsibility of knowledge? What is the responsibility of genius? And in this moment, Einstein's greatness went beyond equations. He began to use his voice for peace. He spoke against nuclear war, warning the world that science must be guided by morality, that progress without conscience would lead only to destruction. He reminded humanity that the same mind that can build weapons of mass destruction can also create cures for diseases, build bridges between nations, and solve the problems of poverty. It all depends on how we choose to use our genius. Einstein was not perfect. He was human. He made mistakes in his personal life, in his relationships, in his pride. But that's what makes his story so powerful. He was not a god, not a superhuman, just an ordinary boy who dared to think differently. And in his humanity, we find a reflection of ourselves. If Einstein could rise from failure, rejection, and obscurity to transform the entire world, then perhaps each of us carries within us a spark of the same possibility. Maybe you don't dream of rewriting the laws of physics. Maybe your dream is to start a business, to write a book, to learn a new language, to inspire others, to build something meaningful. Einstein's story whispers to us, never underestimate where imagination can take you. Even at the end of his life, Einstein's curiosity never died. While others might have rested on their fame, he continued asking questions, continued chasing the mysteries of the universe. He never saw himself as finished, never saw himself as complete. He once said, "The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing." Those words are not just about science. They are about life. The moment you stop asking questions, the moment you stop learning, the moment you stop growing, that is the moment you stop truly living. And so, Einstein left behind not only a scientific legacy, but also a human one. He showed us that failure is not the end. He showed us that imagination is more important than knowledge. He showed us that with courage, even the most ordinary person can rise to extraordinary heights. But most importantly, he showed us that genius is not just about changing equations on a blackboard. It is about changing lives, changing hearts, and changing the way humanity sees itself. So, my friends, what do we learn from Einstein's story? That an ordinary boy can become a genius, yes. But more than that, we learn that inside each of us is a universe of possibility waiting to be unlocked. Maybe today you feel small. Maybe today you feel invisible. Maybe today the world underestimates you. But never forget, so did they with Einstein. The difference is, he never stopped believing in his questions, his imagination, his curiosity. And neither should you. If you carry one lesson from this story, let it be this. Don't just live inside the limits people give you. Break them, dream bigger, question deeper, and use your gifts, not only for your own success, but to make the world better. And before we close, if this story inspired you, if you want more powerful stories, lessons, and motivation to grow your English, your mindset, and your life, then don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Fuel for English Life, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next journey together. We are building a family here, a family of learners, dreamers, and doers. So join us, because together we don't just learn English, we learn life.